We continue now at the top of Daf Gimel and Beis in Meseches Moed Kattan. This is Moed Kattan Daf 3b. The Gemara says, Kiyasa Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar, he said that he heard the following: Yachol Yilka al HaTosefes, I might think that you get Malchus on the addition. V'nasav la Talmud leptura, but there's a limud that teaches us that you're actually pater on that. V'lo yadan, and Rav Dimi said, I don't really know what this means. My Talmudu, my Tosefes. What is the limud, and what was the original thing that we mean that you might be chayiv on the addition? And so the Gemara now tries to interpret the statement that Rav Dimi heard from Eretz Yisrael. Rav Elazar says charisha. What we're talking about over here is plowing during the Shemitah year. V'achi kamar, this is what it means. Yachol yilka al charisha da'asya miklalu pratu klal. I might think that you should get malchus for plowing during the Shemitah year, like we said on the previous Amud. It should be part of a klalu pratu klal, meaning anything that's similar to the malachas that are enumerated in the Torah, those should be prohibited. Charisha would be included. V'nasav le talmud leptura. But then the Gemara has a limud, like we saw in the Brisa, to say that no, you're actually pater on charisha. Why? Dimkain kol hani prati lamli. Because otherwise, what do you need to specify things? If you're specifying Zriya, Zimur, Ketsira, and Bitsira in the pasuk, it means only those are usher, other things are not usher. Charisha would not be a problem. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan says, Yamim shehosifu chachamim lefnei Rosh Hashanah. What we're talking about over here, Rav Dimi's statement, he's talking about the days that the chachamim said, even before Rosh Hashanah, the Shemitah year, they added on to the Shemitah year. And they said, you're not allowed to do malacha that is for the Shemitah year. For example, they were saying you're not allowed to plow the ground in the year before the Shemitah year, because that's really an improvement for the Shemitah year. You're doing it so that the produce should grow better during the Shemitah year. So those days that the chachamim added on, so the idea was exactly this idea. I might have thought you get Malchus. This is what it was saying. Yachol Yilka al Tosefes Rosh Hashanah. I might have thought that you get Malchus on this additional time that you're not supposed to do Malacha before Rosh Hashanah of the Shemitah year. And the Gemara explains the Asyomi becharish uvekatzer tishbos, because you really could have learned that out from that pasuk of becharish uvekatzer tishbos. It's talking about before the Shemitah year. As Rashi over here says, the Asyomi becharish uvekatzer kedamar lekamon, like we're going to say later on, we don't need to write this by the Shemitah year. Sharei Ksiv, it already says in the pasuk sad chalos Isra, bekarma chalos Ismor. It already says you can't do malacha during the Shemitah year. So today le'inyan shishes shenichnas l'shvius. The pasuk really applies to the 6th year when you're doing work on behalf of the 7th year, the Vishviyas Nami Aser, that's also going to be a problem, meaning again, the year going into Shemitah. So I might have thought that. V'nasiv la Talmuda liptura. But then we're going to see, like we're going to see later on, the Gemara is going to have a limud that no, you're pater, you don't get malchus for that. As Rashi over here says, it's going to be a limud learned out from Shabbos that you're actually pater on this Tosefes Rosh Hashanah. And the Gemara says, "My yomim shelifnei Rosh Hashanah." Well, what exactly does it mean, the days or the time before Rosh Hashanah, that you're not allowed to do malacha going into the Shemitah year? Gemara explains Kiritanan. This is like we learned in a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Ad masai chorshin besada ilon." Until when are you allowed to plow in a field of trees? Erev Shviyas, on the year before the Shemitah year. Beishamai omrim, Beishamai say, "Kozman sheyafa lepri." As long as the plowing you're doing is good for the fruits that are already on the tree, so you're not doing it for the benefit of the Shemitah year. You're doing it for the benefit of this 6th year produce. That's still okay. But if you're plowing already not for the fruit on the tree, you're plowing for the eventual fruit in the 7th year, that's going to be a problem. Well, Beis Hillel and Beis Hillel say, Ad Hatzeres, you can plow by the field of trees, you can plow until Shavuos. Ukrov and Divrei Elu, Lios Kedivrei Elu. And really the two opinions are very close to each other. There's not much of a difference between what Beis Shammai say and what Beis Hillel say. And then the Mishnah continues, until when are you allowed to plow a field of grain? A sadeh halavan, meaning a white field, not a field of trees, but a field of grain. So Erev Shviyas, on the year before Shviyas. So Mishatich lahalacha, you're allowed to continue plowing until the time when the moisture on the earth dries up. And also, as long as people are plowing still to plant the cucumbers and the gourds in the winter time, meaning in the 6th year. Same basic idea. If you're doing it for the 6th year, it's going to be okay. Rabbi Shimon says, if you're going to say like that, then every single field is going to depend on that field. It's subjective. We don't want to make a subjective amount of time. Rather, in a field of grain, do until Pesach, that you can plow. And when you're talking about a field of trees, let it be until Shavuos. V'yamar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi mishum bar kapara. And Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, in the name of bar kapara, Rabbi Gamliel uveis dino nimnu al shnei prakim halalu. So Rabbi Gamliel and his court, they voted upon these two time periods. What are the time periods? Again, we're talking about the fact that you're allowed to plow only until Pesach time or Shavuos time, uvitlam, and they actually nullified it. They said, no, we're not going to be so strict. You're allowed to continue plowing even after Pesach, even after Shavuos. It's not a problem. Amar le Rabbi Zeira le Rabbi Avo. So Rabbi Zeira said to Rabbi Avo, V'amri lo Reish Lakish le Rabbi Yochanan. Some have the version that it was Reish Lakish that said to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Gamliel u Beis Dino, Heichi motzim mevatli takanta de Beishamai Beisil. The whole thing doesn't make sense. How could it be that Rabbi Gamliel and his court come along later on and they undo a takana from Beishamai Beisil? We just quote Beishamai Beisil. We talk about this takana. You're allowed to plow only until Pesach, only until Shavuos. Now Rabbi Gamliel, a later court, is going to undo that. How could that be? But we learned in a Mishnah, Ein Bezdin Yochol Levatel Divrei Bezdin Chavero. One court is not allowed to nullify the words of a previous court, Elim Ken Gadol Mimenu B'Chachmo V'Minyan, unless it's greater in wisdom and in number. So that was the kasha. Reish Lakish has Rabbi Yochanan, or Rabbi Zeira has Rabbi Avo. How could this be? So the Gemara says, for 1 second, for one moment, he was shocked. He didn't know exactly what to answer. That's a play on words using a pasuk from Daniel. And then he answered him. Amar le, he said to him, Amor, you should say as follows. Kach hisnu beinein. When they originally made the takana, they made such a tanai. Kalarotz levatel yavo v'yavatel. Anybody who wants to nullify this takana can nullify the takana. In other words, they put into the original takana that a later bezdin is allowed to undo it. But the Gemara still says, is this really their takana? It's not a takana, it's not the Rabbanan. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. This is actually a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Because Rabbi Asi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Nechunya, Ishbikas Beis Chorsan, Eser Netios, the din of the 10 trees, Arava, and when it comes to the halachas of Aravas, this is the idea that on Sukkot we surround the Mizbeach with Aravas, V'nisach HaMayim, and also the concept of Nisach HaMayim, pouring the water libation on Sukkot, halacha l'Moshe Misinai. That's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And as Rashi over here explains, Yud Netios HaMefuzaros Besoch Beisa, Shehu Nun Al Nun, so you have 10 saplings, and they're scattered in an area of a Beisa, Chorshin Kol Asada Shalom, you're allowed to plow the whole thing, B'Shvilan, because of those trees, but Erev Shvias at Rosh Hashanah, on Erev Shvias until Rosh Hashanah. V'Amri Hani Hoel V'Yolado Sein Ikap Seidi Yaseira. The reason why there's that leniency is because it's a great loss of money. They're young trees, they're saplings. L'Kach Chorshin at Rosh Hashanah. That's why you can plow until Rosh Hashanah. Avol Zakena, but if you have older trees, Ein Chorshin at Rosh Hashanah. Apparently you're not allowed to plow all the way up until Rosh Hashanah. Alma Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And you see clearly this is all part of a Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So it's not really a takana midrabanan. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Ki Gemiri Hilchasa, when they taught the Halacha l'Moshe Misinai, Shloshim Yom Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. That only applies for 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. But the Gemara says, V'asuhani, then later they came along, meaning the takana was later made. That's this takana, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. They came along, and Tikkun, they instituted, Mi Pesach u'Me'atzeres. They said, you can only plow up until Pesach, up until Shavuos, so that's the part, that's Midrabanan. V'asnu b'ditu, and then they also put a condition in their own takana, as we said before, Kalarotza levatel yavo v'yavatel. Anyone who wants to come later on, and wants to nullify our takana, can nullify the takana, as Rashi over here says, V'asu b'takana ditu, within their takana, where they said you can only do it until Pesach and Shavuos, they said, if you want to nullify it, you could. When Rabbi Gamliel nullified their takana, he was saying you're allowed to plow from Pesach and Shavuos until 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. But the idea of 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, that indeed is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. But the Gemara says, Vahani hilchasaninu, but is this really halacha l'Moshe Misinai? Kroininu, it's actually learned from a pasuk. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, bechorish of a kotzer tishbos, it says you have to rest from the plowing and the harvesting. Rabbi Akiva says, Ein sarach lomar chorish v'kotzer shel shvius. You don't need to say that you can't plow and harvest on Shemitah, that's obvious. Sharei kvar nemer, because the pasuk already says, Sod cholos izr v'karma cholos izmor. It says you can't plant the field, you can't prune the vineyard. Elo chorish shel erev shvius. Rather, what are we talking over here? We're talking here about the plowing on Erev Shvius. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Dalid Amud Aleph.